Ciao a tutti, io sono Camilla, sono una studentessa del Master di Biologia Marina.
Hi, akong ngalan kay si Kenneth Mechis Yunada. Akong edad kay 24 o gikan ko og Pinas.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Thomas Laborel, je viens d'Annecy en France et je fais mon stage de fin d'études de master à l'Institut marin d'Australie.
My name's Molly. I'm a Master of Marine Biology student. I'm from Melbourne, Victoria.
Mi nombre es Chalier Dones Ortiz y yo vengo de Puerto Rico, así que del Caribe.
Mein Name ist Sina Ehlert, ich bin 23 Jahre alt, komme aus Deutschland und ich studiere gerade im Master an der James Cook University Marine Biology.
咁咧我就係 Marco 啦，我係嚟自香港噶啦。咁我而家就喺度讀緊
Ciao, sono Benedetta, sono italiana e studio biologia marina, mi piacerebbe focalizzarmi nel mondo del management della pesca.
去繼續去支持佢哋捕鯨嘅產業，而呢個會其實係一種藉口咯。喺我嘅角度嚟講，即係我哋唔係淨係，我會覺得鯨魚只不過係我哋咁多種會捕獵嘅生物嘅其中一種生物啦。如果喺科學上嘅角度嚟講。
Also ich bin generell gegen jede Art von Tierfang. Ich glaube aber, dass vor allen Dingen Walfang besonders die Gemüter aufheizt, weil es einfach
Para sa ko, controversial ang whaling kay mga dako man gud sila na hayop. So dali ra sila makitaan sa TV ba o niya. Mao gani na murag dali ra maluoy ang mga tao sa mga whale. Mao nang
Credo che l'aspetto più controverso della pesca delle balene sia proprio il fatto che è sia un'attività commerciale che qualcosa che con una grande importanza culturale e di tradizione per delle determinate comunità.
I mean, whales are pretty magnificent creatures that whaling, for a lot of people, it's their livelihood. However, me personally, I'd like to see it banned just because of how I feel about, these wonderful creatures.
Nel 2024 è una pratica che si potrebbe anche evitare perché ci sono tantissime tecnologie, penso per esempio alla genetica, che è il mio ambito, che permettono degli studi senza andare a inficiare sulle popolazioni dei mammiferi marini. Quindi
De manière globale, quand on parle d'études scientifiques, c'est toujours mieux de ne pas, je ne connais plus le mot, mais de ne pas intervenir physiquement et faire plutôt de l'observation, surtout sur des spécimens qui font cette taille.
Tampoco sé si hay como algún cuerpo reglamentario que entonces vele por este tipo de cosas que se puede instituir también, específicamente para la comunidad científica, ¿no? Mantenerlo a ciertos estándares de ética globales.
佢哋嘅 population 係更加受到威脅嘅話，咁我哋就唔應該去捕獲嗰一種嘅鯨魚類咯，就同其他嘅而家我哋有一個叫可持續海鮮嘅 concept，咁都係避免去捕獲一啲瀕危物種，而去捕獲一啲更加可以持續落去嘅物種。
Credo che il punto di partenza dovrebbe essere andare a valutare qual è lo stato, lo stato delle balene attuale e una volta che si è deciso se lo stato delle balene possa permettere che esse vengano cacciate, bisogna prendere delle decisioni di conseguenza. E potrebbe essere una soluzione quella di dare comunque una certa priorità e dare importanza alla caccia tradizionale delle balene da parte di queste comunità e quindi dare spazio a loro, oltre al mondo della caccia commerciale, anche dare spazio a queste comunità per poter portare avanti la loro tradizione e la loro cultura.
para sa ko, buhato ra jud na sa tao kung ang tao gusto nila buhaton na. So akong maingon ra kay pwede jud ang sustainable whaling. Kay mura na bisag unsa na pangingisda. Kung tarungon lang o butang sa mga rules sa management, makaya ra jud na maabtan.
But for many Indigenous communities, it was much more than a source of meat. It was there was a big cultural and spiritual connection, depending on where. Why is it so controversial? I don't know. I mean, I think that there are many reasons why, and someone described it as like a balloon, and you would have, you could punch it here and then it'd pop out there and then it'd do this and that. And so there have been, I think, two really big objections to whaling. One was that, we have these extraordinary sentient animals much bigger than we are, with bigger brains than we have, although what that means is also controversial. Then we have the question about the cruelty of killing them, and I think that question was addressed by having more humane and quicker methods of killing. But then there's the issue of sustainability, and then when commercial whaling stopped in the Antarctic and many populations started to recover, and you looked and people said, oh well, maybe it can be sustainable, but hey, what about the cruelty? And it just pops back, and so having this, I think many people just don't like the idea.
Okay.
And but it is very dependent on worldview and values. Well, again, I don't think those three things are as distinct. I'd see them as overlapping categories. So traditional whaling is whaling that has occurred from Indigenous communities in many countries for many, many years, often hundreds, thousands of years. Sometimes they sold the catch. So there was, and then of course we had absolutely commercial whaling, such as it occurred in the Southern Oceans, where I don't think there was too much traditional about that. That was pretty clear. And then we had this concept that the Japanese promulgated with regard to so-called scientific whaling, and many people think, well, that was commercial, an excuse for commercial whaling. Again, I think it's a little bit more complicated. At the time, in the 60s, 70s, or the time after the war, most of the information we got from scientific information we got about whales came from whaling, which is the tradition for fisheries biology. You look at the fish, you look at the dead fish. And so most of the whaling scientists were actually trained as fisheries scientists, and even really basic things like where they've been. I mean, people used to put discovery tags far into the mussel and then hope that one day the animal would be killed and the discovery tag would be found, and then they would work out, well, it was tagged here and we got it there, and we have some crude information about where it's moved. And when you think about that now, it's unheard of, unthinkable.
Yeah.
I think the concept of commercial whaling, of scientific whaling, didn't really, I'm going to say, mature with the development of technology and other techniques that enabled scientists to get the information in other and more humane ways. And so that's where it overlapped with commercial whaling, and I think Australia took Japan to court, the international court, over this and won, and obviously Japan eventually left the IWC and continued with so-called commercial whaling in their own EEZ. I don't think Japan liked to be told what to do very much, and there were also a lot of very conservative whale scientists, most of whom are now dead. That generation, and I've met many of them, and that generation are largely dead. But Japan obviously is still hanging in there. I'm not quite sure why. Some of it's about national pride. Okay, well, I think my understanding is that the fin whales would be caught within the Japanese EEZ, and that the best estimate for the population in the North Pacific is about 50,000 animals. It's probably possible to sustainably harvest a limited number of fin whales if the population is that big, and if it's increasing, and if there are no other major sources of mortality. And we don't know how much those whales are moving around. It's seen as a separate stock, but it seems like the genetics is not particularly well established. So I wonder what the neighbouring countries to Japan, with whom those fin whales are a shared stock, think. That would be a question for me. I think it's a values issue, and some people would think, well, if the animals are being killed humanely and if it's a sustainable harvest, it's all right. I understand that the number of Japanese that eat whale meat now is much less than it used to be. And so do they really need to do it? Probably not. After the war, when whaling really exploded in Japan, people were starving. I have a friend and a colleague that I've collaborated for many years, a Japanese person who has written a lot about, more than anyone else in the world, I think, about small type whaling, not the large whaling. And, he told me that after the war, people were so poor, they needed the whale, but they don't need it now. So I think it's rather hard to justify, actually. Particularly for societies which whale very oceanic species, particularly of the sort of small type whaling that come close to their shore, like pilot whales and things like that. I suspect that will linger a lot longer, to be honest, because then it gets very muddled up with Indigenous rights versus sustainability versus animal cruelty. So it's very, very complicated, and obviously the world is much more, I think, respectful of Indigenous rights than they used to be. On the other hand, you'd have to wonder with some of these places, how long is this going to last if what you do, like the Faroe Islands, and you take out whole large groups. I've actually seen that whaling, sort of whaling, in Taiji. Okay. It's pretty horrendous, actually, to watch and to see. I didn't ever see them being killed, but I was part with Kasia-san a group of scientists that sampled the whales to find out about their life history, etc. And yeah, it was horrifying. I mean, the sea was just red with blood, and I kept vomiting into the sea, and the people thought I was just sick because of the blood. Actually, I was suffering from food poisoning. So that was not. But it certainly was. It was pretty horrifying. On the other hand, going to that town meeting and hearing these people who'd been doing it for hundreds of years and how they felt was also made me realise how complicated it was.
Thank you very much, Kelvin.